Welcome to our programming contest submission video. My name is Haseeb.
And I am Owen, and this is
Fantasy Island.
What you're seeing here is the culmination of all our learning and hard work. This is the final boss.
It wasn't easy getting here, however. Countless frustration-filled hours were needed before we were able to slay our dragon, programming something we can be proud of. Starting off, we were unfamiliar with MATLAB. Personally, ENCMP 100 was my first time coding ever.
While I had some programming experience in high school, this was my first time undertaking such an extensive project. But as soon as I heard about the contest, I knew it'd be something I'd like to participate in.
Our first step was on deciding what we wanted to create. We knew we wanted to do something, but we weren't sure what. We decided on a text-based role-playing game, as these games are something we both enjoy playing and are familiar with regarding the gameplay elements.
We didn't just want a text-based story mode in our game. We wanted different elements, each involving different skills. In short, we wanted there to be a variety of fun. We accomplished this by adding mini-games and player-controlled battles throughout the story.
As well, we wanted there to be replay value in the game. This could be done through allowing the player to make their own choices and change the game based on that. For example, there are 4 different endings to our game, all based on what decisions the player made while they were playing.
We started off by learning how MATLAB's guide and graphical user interface tools could be manipulated. Our initial goal was to become proficient enough with these tools so that we could make a customizable character for the player. This involved obtaining the user's input in the GUI and saving it to the player class.
We wanted to allow the player to make a customizable character because we felt that it would elevate our game by making it more immersive. It was not an easy task, however. Our first try at this involved a plethora of global variables and nested code, such as if statements. The player inputs for the characters were stored in these global variables. It was difficult to read and not pleasant to work with. We needed to be able to access this information at different parts of the game in order to achieve our idea of having a responsive and dynamic game. For example, if the player decided to buff their character's agility at the beginning, they might find that the horse races later on will be easier for them.
As the game got bigger, it was hard to find the source of some errors and issues. Because the file was so long and difficult to read, fixing problems was a real challenge. Here is an example of the original player class. We had difficulty setting the name and user-inputted character traits because of our limited experience with object-oriented programming at the time. A lot of research and long hours were required just to learn how to set, alter, and invoke the class properties. For example, after the user inputted the name, the object that stored the player's traits would be overwritten and the name would not be saved.
This piece of code was taken from our first attempt at our minigame, Fireball Frenzy. The player attempts to dodge falling fireballs using the arrow keys. We needed to be able to store the positions of the fireballs and also the player. Originally, to keep track of all this data, we stored every input and piece of data in a global variable. As shown, we had a few too many and it wasn't very readable.
Fortunately, as we became more adept at using the GUI and using MATLAB in general, we were able to transition over to object-oriented programming and structures. This meant using structures and classes to store the user inputs so they could be called on later in the game. Specifically, to solve the nameless player, we used dot notation to save the name and then had the name as an input for the function that resets the player object.
To fix the issue with Fireball Frenzy, we set everything into structures like we learned while making gorillas with Dr. Joseph in our ENCMP 100 lecture. We also opted to use set app data and get app data instead of global variables in our minigames. This made it more efficient and easier to debug.
Through this project, we learned a lot not only about programming, but how to work in a team and succeed together. To overcome the challenges presented by this competition, we needed a lot of perseverance and a dedication to learning.
We learned about how to split a large task into smaller, more manageable tasks, such as taking one large M file and dividing it into different functions that can be invoked and altered as needed. For example, the battle M file is invoked many times throughout the game. It needs to be adaptable to the different gameplay elements, which is why it was made to be its own file that calls different functions. All in all, we learned that things may seem hard at first, but by persevering, you learn a lot regarding how to overcome these challenges. As well, we learned that coding is not just an application of technique or a science. It is an art. It is a chance to express your creativity.
Thank you for the opportunity to compete in this competition, and we hope you enjoy playing our game.